Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm delighted to have Ben Cooper with me here, owner of Kinetics. We know Kinetics on the channel because it's where we got the custom triangle and forks for the Brompton. Ben himself has done so many custom builds on Brompton, it's probably quite hard to actually track. But today we're here with him, so let's jump straight into it. Ben, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for coming.
You might not be aware, but I've actually seen Kinetics since I was a little boy. I've been in Glasgow for about 25 years and I've seen the shop's first face in Rannoch Drive. I then seen it on Switchback and now we're here in Gascue Road. Can you just give me a little bit of history in terms of the Kinetics itself, where it came from and how the whole idea started?
Well, it started when I was a student. A bike shop down the road had a funny looking bike, or recumbent, and I stupidly blew my first student grant on buying it. And I got hooked. I got hooked on unusual bikes and messing about with bikes, and I decided it was more fun than having a real job. So after university, I tried getting a proper graduate job, just didn't like it. So decided to start doing this. And that was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Started with that small shop on Rannoch Drive, stayed there for about 3 years, moved to the bigger one on Switchback Road, was there for 12 years, then moved here in 2014. And yeah, this is a great place for us. Industrial unit and display area, everything. Yep.
And how would you say over those years, have you seen retail change much from what you've had to do? Or?
It has changed a lot. We've also changed a lot. I've changed a lot. Of course, the internet has changed everything. When we first started, we had a basic web page, but it was really very early days. There wasn't anything involved with that. Whereas now everything involves the internet. Most of what I do is selling online. Most of my customers are overseas. So that's made a massive difference. In terms of what I do, we've changed a lot from being sort of more of a normal bike shop, which does the occasional unusual things, to being just doing the unusual stuff. So it's now all about making unusual bikes, recumbents, folding bikes, unusual electric things, and a lot more manufacturing than I ever did before. So a lot more of it's making things from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about making it from scratch. Where did you get your, let's say, educational qualifications from working with metal and all that type of stuff?
Pretty much self-taught. And when I was a student, I worked for another little bike shop called Harper Cycles. And we went on a little frame building course at North Glasgow College. It was, I think, about 8 weeks course, but it just, it wasn't a serious education in anything at all. It was really just messing about with oxyacetylene torch. The rest of it was just practice, just getting bits of metal, welding it together, seeing what happens, learning as I go, basically. Yeah.
I mean, you say you do all custom builds. What to your memory is the most custom built and funky thing you've ever done that was proper one-off? I
mean, there's the things which are sort of the ones that get lots of attention. So I built a 4-person bicycle, for example, that was a promotional thing for Royal Bank of Scotland. I've built tandem recumbent tricycles. I've built things called race runners, which are sort of tricycles that you use your legs to run on. So people with various mobility issues. Built a few of those, very light ones. There have been recumbents, there have been folding bikes, prototypes for other manufacturers, that kind of thing. But yeah, most of what I build now is Bromptons and various unusual recumbents, that kind of thing. Yeah,
and obviously, you know myself very much, Brompton is my avenue. When did you first get potentially the idea that there was a market for after Brompton parts, like doing the frames and triangles, to what you obviously do nowadays? When was that idea like, oh, actually, this is something that's a gap in the market?
It kind of evolved kind of by itself almost from the beginning. I mean, even back in the Rannoch Drive shop, I was a Brompton dealer and I was modifying Bromptons for unusual things. I think there was one customer from Germany who was very, very tall. He was 7 feet tall. So made a telescopic stem for him, made the enlarged things a bit for him. Yeah. So it kind of evolved. Things like making roll-off hubs and disc brakes on Bromptons. This has all been people just asking, can you do this? And I hate saying no. So I always say, yes, I'll give it a try. We'll have a try and see if it's possible. So it's all evolved from that. There's never been a big plan to, create a product and launch it to the market. It's all been entirely people saying, can you make this for me? Yeah. And you try it and you make it, and then it evolves from there and just keep evolving and improving it.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because obviously, I've always seen the website and just assumed that's what you offer because you've tried it all. Is there anyone that's came with an idea specifically for Brompton that's been, can you do this? Be like, it's just not possible on the Brompton, it's been tried but didn't work?
I suppose the one that I still get quite a lot of questions about is things like the Pinion Gearbox, which is it's a lovely system. I've used Pinion Gearboxes on other things, and it is a relatively common question. People say, can you put a pinion in a Brompton? I know it's been done. There's been a few people who've done it, but my problem is that, yes, it can be done, but the engineering compromises to do it, I don't like. You have to lengthen the wheelbase a lot. It affects how it folds. And I don't quite see the point because a roll-off hub in the back gives you the same kind of gearing range as a pinion. So that's the kind of thing which, yeah, you kind of look at it and think, well, it's not so much that things can't be done, it's that they can be done, but I don't quite see why, basically. So that's the kind of thing I tend to avoid.
Yeah, I think that's actually really well said. And one of the things that I get a lot in my comments about, specifically for Brompton, how it should be done, is the belt drive. Obviously, for a commuter bike, a belt drive makes a lot of sense, but I have also seen stuff like Gates say that you shouldn't fold the belt and all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've successfully done them and still produce them today. What is your overall feeling to the belt drive? Is it an easy conversion? Is it something that you would also recommend for the commuters?
It's been interesting because, yes, when I first started doing the belt drives on Bromptons, yes, the Gates had this complete prohibition on bending it backwards on itself. And yes, I had talks with people at Gates and things as, yeah, you just can't do that. You shouldn't be doing that at all. But they've relaxed their criteria a lot on that. And you'll see actually a lot of the modern bikes, especially the full suspension things, now use belt drives with an idler pulley for the rear swing arm. So they're now bending back on itself. They now have specifications for kind of radii you're allowed to use. So as much as anything, it's that I think that now that a lot more belts are in use, people get a better idea of what does damage them and what doesn't damage them and what you can get away with and what you can't. So with Bromptons, the main problem with Bromptons is you still need to have that tensioner system to take up the slack when it folds. So I've gone through about a dozen variations of design of this tensioner system. We now have quite a slick system, which, yeah, it means it folds like the chain drive system. It takes up the slack, but you get all the advantages of a belt, the cleanness and things like that. Yeah, it works well now.
And it works across the whole family of hubs that you offer. It's not exclusive to anything. I think you might need to be specific on hub, but it's pretty much a system to put on.
I mean, the rear triangles and the tensioners are pretty much standard for everything. The rear triangle has a little split in it. The tensioner has a few variations for chain line and more belt line. Basically the main restriction, actually, to be honest, is what Gates make. And the main problem is roll-off. So with roll-off, because roll-offs are quite low geared, on a Brompton, I use the smallest possible rear cock, which is 90, and the biggest possible front is a 70. And that, on a standard Brompton, I mean, it works, but it gives you a bit lower gearing than ideally you'd want. It gives you a top gear of about 90 inches. Ideally, you'd want to be a bit higher than that. And that's just a restriction of what Gates make. But on the bigger wheel Bromptons, the 18s and the 20s, it's brilliant. Great combination.
And if you were to look at your standard custom, what would you say is the most common specification that someone comes to you for? Is it going up to a 20-inch? Is it to just increase the gearing, or?
Again, that's been changing. I think partly because of the things I now offer. Most common option now is to go for the 18-inch wheels, which is a nice intermediate size. Gets you fatter tyres, you can have knobbly tyres if you want, comfier on paths and tracks, but the whole folded package isn't much different. And in terms of gearing, it's kind of 50-50 between the Alpine 11 and the roll-off. Right. They're both very popular options. So yeah, and most people again go for disc brakes. But of course what I do is a big range. You can get just the frame parts like you did. You can get kits to convert your own bike, or I can build a complete bike for you. So it kind of different customers there's different profiles really what people want.
Yeah, I think that obviously leads me on nicely to, obviously I came to you first for my triangle, my forks make the Mountain Brompton what it is, obviously. Yeah. I don't know if you've had much experience on it, or you've taken your one out. My first venture on it was taking up like sort of Pen of Anway and doing like a proper big mountain pass on it, and it was amazing to get the feedback from people being like, why is that even up here?
Yes.
And the main disadvantage they said was obviously 20-inch wheels just is really hard for the descent. So the ascent for me was fine, but the descent did still feel a little bit iffy. Yeah. From where did I think when I read your website, the MT idea just came because why not? But have you actually done anything crazy on it, or what actually spurred that? Not really.
I mean, I've done, yeah, I've been sort of messing about on trials and things. Took it on holiday to Aaron, did some of the halfway up group fell, that kind of thing on it. No, really, the simple answer is the first one I built was a joke. Yeah. Someone said, because I've been making the ones with 18-inch wheels, and with 18-inch you can get 18 by 1.75 knobbly tyres, which are pretty good off-road. But someone said, can you just get the 2.4-inch fat tyres onto it? And a while ago, I built some with 16-inch fat tyres. You can get 16 by 3-inch fat things, so very tiny fat tyres. Those look awesome. Not actually really good off-road, but just looked awesome. So I had kind of an idea of how to get fat tyres into a Brompton. I'll just build them for a joke and see how well it works. Because I don't change the main frame at all. It's just a rear triangle and the forks. So I wasn't sure if even raising the whole thing up that much and changing the geometry if it'd even be rideable. But I'll just build one to see what it does, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's interesting. Obviously, you were saying you're very like self-taught and all that. And one of the things I think when people, I guess, are really into bikes, is about geometry and all this type of stuff. So obviously, I didn't know if there was part of that because, as I say, the MT line for me has just fit me perfectly, and I just loved that raised height from it. So it's been like an absolute pleasure to ride. But on the other side, I think I've not went down any light route of it, so it is a heavy bike, but it still managed to get me up on that side. Obviously, the big theme of cutting weight is titanium, but apparently is a very complicated material to work with. I'm assuming for yourself that's maybe a step up from what you can do at the moment. Do you see titanium coming into your frames that you do? Because I believe when I did a bit of research, there is someone in Russia that does disc frames, but from titanium. Is that something you can see coming in the future? Or?
Well, I don't know if it's the Vostok ones you've seen.
I think,
yeah. He's actually in Estonia, but he disappeared from view a couple of years ago, so I don't think he's making anything anymore. My general feeling on titanium is that, yes, firstly it's difficult to work with and expensive to work with. And part of the problem is also it can, once you get a finished product, it can look perfectly good, but if the heat treating and welding hasn't been done properly, it can have hidden flaws in it, which it again sort of worries about build quality and things like that. It's probably also a different skill base. I've been brazing things together for 25 years. I know how to braze. And I can TIG weld. Some things get TIG welded, and titanium has to be TIG welded, but I don't have the same level of skill in TIG welding as I do to do it. But the simple answer is also, fundamentally, we're sticking 1.8 kilos of roll-off hub and disc brakes and everything onto it, saving 100 grams on the rear triangle. It seems a lot of expense. Again, it's one of the things that takes a lot of expense, a lot of effort to save a little bit. So I prefer to stick with, I know how reliable my frames are. I know how reliable my forks are. I want to stay with things that are reliable instead of taking a punt on using titanium just because I can, basically.
Yeah. I generally feel from my consensus in the community I've had is that everyone shares that same aspect. I kind of appreciate, as someone that comes from road bikes, I do love the really lightweight titanium. I've not had the chance to ride it, but the P-line's a good middle ground for me at the moment. But everyone is just on that same bit. The whole point in the Brompton is just to be an easy-going city bike, and I think you have to keep that at the heart of it. So when you're talking about spending maybe double the cost to get a frame that saves you that bit, I think it is that point that, especially in this custom market, it doesn't really have the place, because if you really want that lightweight bike, it's already kind of out there, and you can't really get it lighter than what they've kind of done on that side there.
What I find interesting is that obviously pretty much all the custom builds I do end up going to my website and social media one time or another once I get around to it. And generally the people who actually buy these bikes, the customers, they don't really care that much about the weight. But people on social media always want to know how much it weighs. Yeah. So I've got the habit of, before I ship a bike out the door, I weigh it just to make sure. But it's the kind of thing which generally it seems to matter more for people who like collecting numbers rather than people who actually like riding the bike sometimes, I think.
Yeah, and the one I can't say complained about, but as someone 6'2", I generally feel the Brompton fit is really, really poor for me. So I always opt for the high handlebars, and then if I am in an event, I'll just put them forward so I've got that extra reach. You talk about you had a really tall customer. If someone was, say, much taller than me, like 6'7", and wanted something like that, what is the best way to approach you on that, and what actually gets done to accommodate any extra length on it? That's
tricky because, yes, doing the length properly means actually extending the mainframe, and that's the kind of thing which I don't want to get into, because that's this whole... The trouble with Bromptons is once you change one thing, everything else gets affected because of how it folds. So really it's a matter of, can you shove the saddle back a bit? Can you have... people used to put quick releases on the handlebar clamp to quick release the handlebars. Very bad idea, and Brompton always discouraged it because you end up scoring the handlebar and it fractures and things like that. But you can do things like have adapters which let you move the handlebars forward. You can do things like have an S-type stem which has more of a curve on it, but then put M-type bars on it. You can mess about a bit with that. The trouble with all this stuff is it affects the folded size, especially sometimes when you fold the handlebars down. And ideally you want them to fold flush with the front wheel, but if you've messed about with that, then they don't do that so well. So it's a trade-off, basically. And the simple answer is a Brompton is built to be a city bike for people to nip around the city on. We're doing things to it that's not really meant to be done with it, basically.
And I guess, I'm just curious, has Brompton ever spoke to you about your designs or anything like that, or have they had any input, or I'm guessing they're aware of what you do? Oh yeah, yes. And it's changed a lot, because when I first started being a Brompton dealer, they were a very small company. They were making a few hundred bikes a year, and now they're aiming for 100,000 bikes a year. So they've grown massively. So it's changed a lot. In the early days, I had a very close
working relationship with Brompton and with Andrew Ritchie, and they would let me buy things like fork blades, just bare fork blades, so to build early things with stuff like that. Then it kind of changed that they grew bigger and they decided that they didn't like the idea of anyone modifying their bikes. So they went a bit cold on the whole idea about it. And it didn't help that there have been a few other manufacturers or people tinkering with bikes who have had manufacturing problems, things have broken. And that's kind of impacted on Brompton's reputation, and they didn't like that. But now I think they're now big enough that they don't feel concern about a few people messing about with things. I mean, I make about a couple hundred bikes a year. They make 100,000. It's only tiny numbers. And yeah, now I mean, I'm not a Brompton dealer, but we do exchange emails relatively often about things. It's.
And from a company point of view, I mean, I've actually just done a video recently on like almost a comparison to when Will Butler Adams took over for Andrew. Have you seen much of a change in the company's ethos now, what they believe, how they do stuff? Because obviously he's very much an advocate for monthly subscription, hiring a Brompton, more people on Bromptons is better for Bromptons. Have you seen much of a difference? Do you think he's much more commercialised in that way than maybe what Andrew was?
Oh, definitely, yes, yeah. And I think that's probably a good thing. I mean, Andrew was a great inventor and absolutely obsessed with the invention itself, but back when I was a Brompton dealer, they were never the easiest company to deal with because they were always sort of, kind of actually selling things was kind of the secondary thing. Whereas now, I mean, especially if you've read the new book that is now out, which is very interesting, they're a big company now, and you kind of expect a big corporation. They're going to be much more corporate, and that has its pros and its cons. They have lots of money to throw into proper new things like the new all titanium bike, which is great. But it also means that perhaps they're not the small, friendly company they used to be. But that's kind of expected, I suppose.
I don't know if you've seen also that in the Eurobike show they announced that they'll be doing a 12-speed. Did you see anything on that?
It's kind of interesting because Brompton, they tend to make prototypes of things at least decades before anything ever actually appears. So I mean, there's always been rumours of this kind of thing coming. Whether it actually appears, whether it doesn't, it also gets even more complicated because sometimes they license their name to. I've seen Brompton branded cargo bikes, for example.
Oh wow!
Picture of those, and which is sort of a Far Eastern thing. So, and of course, I went through various phases of licensing stuff to people like Neo Bikes in Taiwan. It'd be interesting to see if it happens. It kind of makes sense because they've already got the 4-speed derailleur and they've already got the 3-speed hub gear, so combining together, it makes sense. I think with Brompton, their focus really is on keeping the compact folded size. It's always going to limit what they can do with for gearing and brakes and stuff like that. I think that's probably the main thing. Yeah,
because what I found strange when I seen it was a prototype was on the P-Line electric, and I'm like, I think there's one bike that probably doesn't need the massive range of gearing. It's the P-Line electric, but strange enough, that's what they had it on for display, and I just think we'll see how it goes. But again, I don't think until they really test it in mass market, it's quite hard to say, because I believe that obviously the C-Line would then have to have a redesigned triangle to accommodate the derailleur, because I think at the moment the derailleur is only on the P and T line, so it'd be interesting there. And I think I asked when I first met you if you could do derailleurs on Bromptons. Is that something that you still can do? Is it similar to what Brompton have done, or was your system completely different?
No, I mean my basic answer is yes, it can be done. And my basic idea is I make different dropouts, which can take a normal derailleur. So Brompton's derailleur, it's their own custom parallelogram system. It's a very nice design. It's really well engineered, but of course it's completely custom to their hubs, their rear triangles, everything. And again, there are people making knockoff copies and upgrades and going to 5-speed and things. But and the way I've done it is to just use a standard derailleur system. It's a bit more like how Birdie have done it on their folding bikes. And the main problem, really, the main reason I don't like it is that, again, with like it is on the Birdie, it stops you being able to fold the bike in any gear. That's a big advantage of a standard Brompton system, is you can just fold the bike and off you go. Whereas with the derailleur systems, you have to put it into the top gear first before you fold. It adds an extra stage to the messing about. But I'm happy, people have asked, I have made a few with derailleurs, just, they do have advantages.
Because it can be done.
Yes, exactly,
I'm trying to think if there's any, there's loads of stuff I can ask, but one thing I want just for the end of the video is, can you just do a quick, how people can find you if someone's got a question? What's the best way to get in touch with yourself?
Sure, best way to get in touch really is through the website. Emails are great because I can keep a nice list of who's emailed me what about everything. I'm also on WhatsApp, and there's Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram and things like that. But the website, kinetics.bike, is the best place for all the price lists, pictures of all the builds I've done, options that can be done for different Bromptons or the kits or frame parts, whatever. So that's the best place, really, start at the website.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a pleasure to have Ben here to give us all that information. Obviously, if you do want to get in touch with him, he's give you all the information you need about his website there. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider liking it. And as always, thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Goodbye.